He was an inventor ahead of his time. From banking machines to refrigeration, Jacob Perkins left behind ideas that shaped the modern world. This is the story of the man known as the father of the refrigerator. Jacob Perkins was born in 1766 in Newburyport, Massachusetts, USA. His father was a hatter and shoemaker, and his mother was a homemaker. When he was just 2 years old, his family moved to a farm in the nearby town of West Newbury, where his father acquired land and started a farm. And though his childhood was spent working on the family farm, Perkins still managed to display an inquisitive and inventive nature. For example, at age 14, he built a mill powered by water wheels. After spending much of his early life on the family farm, Perkins moved to Boston and began working as a hatter. However, his time in this profession was relatively brief, as his health soon deteriorated from mercury poisoning, which was a common ailment among hatters at the time due to their use of mercury in felt making. Forced to stop working, Perkins and his family moved out of the city and back to his family's farm in West Newbury. In those days, producing fake currency was a widespread problem. Even during the American Revolution, colonial leaders had struggled with counterfeits being produced by both British and Patriot sympathizers. Counterfeiting remained a problem following the creation of the United States, and in response, Perkins designed a machine capable of cutting and embossing banknotes with fine precision, dramatically improving the difficulty of forging them. He patented his machine in 1790, and the following year sold the rights to the U.S. government. It wasn't long before the government officials saw the value of Perkins' invention and ordered a second machine. The exact details of how his machinery worked are unknown, lost to history. But it is believed that the system used a series of engraved rollers to cut and stamp the bills. Although Perkins didn't make much money from the sale of the machines, his reputation as an inventor was established. In 1795, Perkins relocated to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and opened his own workshop. One of his early projects in Philadelphia was a more efficient method of manufacturing nails. Up until that point, nails were made by hand, a laborious and slow process. Perkins devised a machine to mass-produce nails quickly, which caught the attention of one of his customers, Thomas Jefferson, who purchased several dozen of these machines while he was president. Impressed by Perkins' abilities, Jefferson appointed him as an engineer to help design a steam-powered gun, which ended up becoming the first official project of the United States Armory. While the Armory eventually decided against producing the weapon to its complicated design, the gun did receive some limited production, with between 20 and 50 ever being made. Perkins' next project was a steam pump that could provide hot water on demand for heating and other uses. In fact, he actually patented such devices. One was a simple pump that delivered heated water, and the other was an entire central heating apparatus that supplied hot water through pipes to radiators. Both were patented in 1806, although they wouldn't see much use until decades later when central heating became more popular. Perkins also patented a rotary engine in 1807. Unfortunately, like many of his other inventions, it never received much attention. Over the years, Perkins would continue to invent and experiment with various technologies, including innovations in printing, such as a machine to print banknotes, postage stamps, playing cards, and wallpaper. However, despite his success and wide-ranging talents, financial difficulties persisted throughout his life. In 1834, Perkins had what would become his most significant breakthrough. He patented the world's first vapor compression refrigeration system, which is the same basic principle behind how all modern refrigerators and air conditioners work. But it was far from a simple invention. Before explaining how it works, it's important to understand the state of refrigeration technology at the time. Until that point, ice harvested from frozen lakes and ponds was the primary means of cooling. So, if you wanted to keep food fresh or preserve it for the winter months, you needed access to a source of ice. To address this problem, various mechanical cooling devices had been developed, but they relied on placing ice in direct contact with the substance needing cooling, limiting their usefulness. Others used chemicals like sulfuric acid, which would freeze when exposed to air, allowing for cooling by evaporation. Still, none of these solutions were entirely satisfactory, nor were they particularly practical for use in the home. In order to understand the breakthrough that Perkins achieved, it helps to know a little bit about thermodynamics. According to the laws of thermodynamics, heat always flows from hotter objects to colder objects. Perkins realized that if you took a liquid that boiled at a temperature lower than water, pumped it into a sealed vessel, and then evaporated some of the liquid, the remaining liquid would become colder. Using this process in reverse, he theorized that you could achieve cooling, but doing so required a special fluid called refrigerant, which would evaporate at a low temperature and then be condensed back into a liquid. In order to do this, Perkins used ether, a chemical compound that has a very low boiling point. By pumping ether into a sealed vessel, he could rapidly lower the temperature inside the vessel below 0 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 18 degrees Celsius. Perkins' system consisted of 5 main components: a piston and cylinder, a condenser, an expansion valve, an evaporator, and a compressor. Ether flowed from the cylinder into the condenser, where it would cool and become a liquid. It then passed through the expansion valve, which lowered the pressure on the liquid and caused it to boil. Finally, the gas returned to the cylinder, where the pressure was increased, and it was compressed and heated until it could flow back through the system again. Though technically impressive, the device was impractical and inefficient, so he never built a full-sized unit. Regardless, his concept was sound, and he had proven that vapor compression refrigeration could work. What Perkins lacked, however, was capital to build and promote his invention on a larger scale. Around this time, he suffered financial losses due to the failure of a business venture in Texas, which led to severe depression. Feeling overwhelmed, he stopped working on his refrigeration system and abandoned his workshop. In fact, it was so devastating to him that he even tried to take his own life by drinking a vial of laudanum, a mix of opium and alcohol. After recovering from this attempt, he retreated to his farm in West Newbury, where he would stay for the rest of his life. During this period of his life, Perkins was visited by Charles Grafton, an agent of the U.S. Patent Office. Recognizing Perkins' genius, Grafton urged him to return to Philadelphia and patent his refrigeration system. Although Grafton convinced Perkins to leave the farm and go to Philadelphia, it would only be temporary. While there, Perkins would patent his vapor compression refrigeration system on February 1835, but after receiving the patent, he experienced another setback. A fire destroyed his workshop along with most of his equipment and notes. Unable to cope with another devastating loss, Perkins returned to his farm in New Hampshire and sealed himself off from the world. There he would live in seclusion for the remainder of his life. In his final years, Perkins would correspond with several individuals, including Grafton and John Henry, who was the director of the U.S. Patent Office. They described him as having been worn down from his years of struggle, writing that he appeared haggard and emaciated. Perkins died on June 1849 at the age of 83. In the years since his death, Perkins' legacy has grown and his impact on the world has become clearer. In 1916, a new species of fossil mammal from Wyoming was named in his honor. Just over a decade later, in 1927, a bronze plaque was placed on the house where he was born. In 1963, the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers presented him with a special award for his contributions to the field. And in 1985, he was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. In addition, several companies have adopted his image and likeness as a symbol of their quality and innovation. And yet, despite his extraordinary inventions and groundbreaking work, most people today have probably never heard of him. Now let us know in the comments below, which of Jacob Perkins' inventions do you find most interesting? If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out more just like it.